When Days Gone was released in 2019, it polarized audiences and critics with its unconventional gameplay, different interpretation of a main protagonist, take it or leave it story approach, and even those affiliated with the project were very blunt with public statements about the game before and after its release. But the speculative scenario is this: Days Gone was a brilliant yet conflictive gaming experience. When the game was released, there was not much emphasis or focus on Days Gone, mostly because at the time there were more than a few different types of post-apocalyptic scenarios about infectious diseases, on focusing on stories of those attempting to survive. Media from Ben's studio tried to give impressions that Days Gone would have done the entire genre differently, for a new interpretation and, more importantly, a new experience for gamers to enjoy. However, this didn't occur, as a short time after the game's release, sales of physical and digital copies of the game didn't meet sales expectations from Sony and Ben's studio. And from information now known, officials at Sony and within Ben's studio weren't happy with the fact that Days Gone was selling horribly. Even critics as well as gamers weren't reacting positively to the entire premise of Days Gone. A short time after the game's release, these initial suspicions were confirmed in a tweet by the game's director. Already dealing with negative feedback from the game, Ben's studio later sought to minimize the impact from the disappointment relating to Days Gone, as it released a damage control based public statement praising all involved. Even when the video game was later released on PlayStation Plus for members to experience, this was around the time where the game was re-evaluated by players. But further controversial statements and comments from Days Gone director John Garvin didn't make the situation for a proposed sequel to Days Gone any better. Counter-arguments harder that the re-evaluation of the game at the time and since was mostly due in part to the exposure through the PlayStation Plus program, and while exposure to the game was welcome, it did nothing to help Ben's studio on the entire premise for the game of Days Gone, even a proposed sequel at the time. Those who were hopeful for a sequel even made online petitions even to force Sony to allow Ben's studio to officially fund development for a sequel. Eventually, Sony made public announcements itself mentioning that plans for a sequel to Days Gone were officially cancelled, or at least cancelled in the way that Ben's studio had planned for a sequel by their own standards at the time. Originally, there were plans for a sequel to at least continue or even truly end the story, which was revealed to continue with the secret ending in Days Gone. But due to circumstances surrounding the game, Sony leadership quickly stopped further plans for the game. Ben's studio was so confident that a sequel was going to be allowed by Sony that a sequel was already being developed by Ben's studio, which, if development were allowed to have continued, the sequel would have been released sometime in 2023. Besides the staff working on the game, all details relating to Days Gone invoked pivotal responses to the game for positive or negative reasons. From the premise to the story to characters to dynamics and everything else of the game, there were countless opinions for and against it as a result. At the time of the game's release, there were other more established intellectual properties relating to a post-apocalyptic societal collapse scenario. At the time of release, there were mixed receptions to the story that was Days Gone. At the time of release, the characters in the game were considered unique by some, but forgettable or even hated by others.